What if I told you that history itself has already answered the question most people are afraid to ask? What if the future has already been tested once and passed every test placed before it? Imagine being taken from your home as a teenager. Your city is burning. Your temple is stripped bare. The world you understood collapses in a single season. You are marched into exile and forced to serve an empire that does not know your God, does not share your values, and does not care whether you survive. You do not choose this life, it is imposed on you. And yet, somehow, from inside that collapse, a vision of the entire future of the world begins to form. This is where the story of Daniel begins. Not in mystery, but in loss. Daniel did not write from a position of power. He wrote from captivity, from the courts of Babylon, surrounded by rulers who believed themselves eternal. He received visions that quietly dismantled that illusion. Not through rebellion, not through armies, but through time itself. What makes Daniel unsettling is not that he spoke about the future. Many have done that. What makes him different is that history later returned and confirmed his words, step by step, empire by empire, century by century. He saw Babylon fall before it ever weakened. He saw Persia rise while Babylon still ruled. He saw Greece fracture at the height of its power. He saw Rome dominate without ever naming it. These were not vague impressions or poetic metaphors. They were sequential, structured, and precise. Gold gave way to silver, silver to bronze, bronze to iron, and iron, though strong, was never permanent. Empires came and went exactly as he described. That fact alone should already trouble us, because if the early visions were wrong, we could dismiss everything that follows as ancient imagination. But they weren't. Archaeology, recorded history, and even secular scholarship reluctantly confirm that Daniel's outline of world empires aligns with reality in ways that should not be possible for someone writing more than 2,500 years ago. This creates a problem most people try to avoid. If the past unfolded exactly as Daniel saw it, on what basis do we assume the future won't? The tension in Daniel's writings comes from this uncomfortable continuity. His visions do not feel like isolated prophecies. They feel like a single, unfolding narrative, one that begins in ancient exile and stretches forward to a moment that has not yet arrived. A moment that does not belong to Babylon, Persia, Greece, or Rome. A moment that belongs to us. Daniel himself struggled with this. Near the end of his life, after decades of service under multiple empires, he received visions that disturbed him more than any that came before. Not because they were violent, but because they reached beyond his lifetime, beyond history as he knew it, beyond the rise and fall of kingdoms he could already recognize. These final visions were sealed. That detail matters more than it first appears. Daniel is told that parts of what he sees are not meant for his time. They are closed, preserved, restrained for a future generation. In other words, prophecy itself acknowledges a delay. A pause. A waiting period where history continues, but fulfillment does not. And this is where the story quietly shifts from ancient history to modern unease. Because Daniel does not describe an endless cycle of empires. He describes a sequence with an endpoint, a final phase, a closing chapter that follows a long silence. That silence is where we are now. We live in a world that feels strangely suspended, technologically advanced yet emotionally unstable, globally connected yet increasingly fragmented. We have more information than any generation before us, and less certainty about where we are going. The old structures feel brittle. The rules that once felt permanent, economic, political, even moral, no longer carry the weight they once did. And beneath all of it, there is a quiet sense that something is unfinished. Daniel's prophecies do not jump from ancient times straight to the end. They move with intention. They slow down, they pause. They leave space for human history to unfold in what feels like an extended breath being held. This is what many scholars refer to as the prophetic gap. A stretch of time where the clock appears to stop, not because nothing is happening, but because the final sequence has not yet begun. And here is the unsettling implication. If prophecy stopped once before and resumed exactly when it was meant to, then the current silence is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of alignment. It suggests that history is not drifting aimlessly, but waiting for a signal, a trigger, a moment when the final visions Daniel saw begin to move again. This is why Daniel matters now more than ever. Not because he predicts chaos, but because he reveals structure beneath it. He shows that history is not random, that empires do not rise and fall by accident, that human power reaches limits it cannot see until it crosses them. And most importantly, he shows that accuracy in prophecy is not evenly distributed. It is either precise or it is false. Daniel's record leaves little room for reinterpretation. When his visions describe timing, the timing is exact. When they describe transitions, those transitions occur cleanly. When they describe collapse, it comes not with warning, but with inevitability. Which brings us back to the question most people would rather avoid. If everything Daniel saw up to a certain point unfolded exactly as written, why would the remaining visions be any different? The answer to that question carries weight. Because the visions that remain unfulfilled are not distant or abstract. They do not concern forgotten empires or ancient kings. They concern a final sequence of events that converge on a world connected enough to feel them all at once. A world capable of global agreements, global deception, global fear, and ultimately, global reckoning. Daniel did not see our technology. He did not name our nations, but he described a system, political, spiritual, and ideological, that feels uncomfortably compatible with the world we inhabit now. And he described it as the final act, not the end of existence, but the end of human rule as we know it. Before we can understand what that means, we have to step into the most precise prophecy Daniel ever received. One that does not speak in symbols alone, but in numbers, in timelines, in years that land on real moments in history with surgical accuracy. Because once you see where that timeline stopped, you can no longer pretend not to notice where it is waiting to begin again. There are moments in history where everything seems to pause, not because nothing is happening, but because something is being held back. Daniel encountered one of those moments while praying alone. He was not seeking the end of the world. He was not asking about distant futures or cosmic collapse. He was pleading for understanding about his people, about Jerusalem, about exile, about whether judgment would ever give way to restoration. His concern was immediate, earthly, personal, and that is what makes the answer so unsettling. Because the response Daniel received did not stop at his lifetime. It did not even stop at the next generation. It unfolded a timeline so expansive, so precise, that it reached from the rubble of Jerusalem all the way to the final chapter of human history. When the angel appeared, the message was not symbolic poetry. It was structure, measurement, order. 70 weeks have been determined. At first glance, it sounds modest, 70 units of time. But Daniel understood the language of prophecy well enough to know that these were not ordinary weeks. In prophetic reckoning, days represent years. A single week, 7 days, becomes 7 years. Multiply that forward, and the number becomes unavoidable. 490 years. Not an estimate, not a metaphor. A fixed span of time assigned to the fate of a city, a people, and events that would echo far beyond them both. What follows is where prophecy becomes dangerous to ignore. The timeline is divided with deliberate clarity, not blurred, not generalized, broken into segments with specific functions, each one pointing toward a visible outcome. First, 7 weeks, then 62, and finally, one remaining week left isolated at the end. The opening segment, 49 years, would begin with a command. Not a feeling, not a movement, a documented decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. History records exactly such a command, issued by a Persian king while Daniel's words were still circulating in exile. From that moment forward, the clock starts. 69 prophetic weeks, 483 years lead to a single destination. Not a range of possibilities, not a vague era, a moment. And when the count is traced forward, it lands with unsettling precision on the appearance of the Messiah. Not his birth, his unveiling. The year when Jesus of Nazareth steps into public view. The year he is baptized. The year his identity is revealed. The year history pivots in ways even Rome could not yet perceive. Daniel wrote this more than 5 centuries before it happened. No margin for error, no interpretive flexibility. The timeline does not drift, it does not overshoot, it does not miss by a generation. It arrives exactly where it claims it will. This is the point where prophecy stops being intriguing and becomes intrusive, because accuracy of that level demands explanation. But the most overlooked detail is not where the timeline lands. It is what happens next. After the 69th week concludes, the prophecy does not flow smoothly into the final 7 years. There is no countdown, no immediate continuation. Instead, the narrative fractures. The Messiah is cut off. Jerusalem falls again. The sanctuary is destroyed. History records this too, decades later under Roman authority, when the city is leveled and the temple reduced to ash. But still the final week does not begin. The clock stops. This is not a missing detail. It is a deliberate absence. The prophecy leaves 7 years untouched, suspended beyond the destruction of Jerusalem, beyond the rise and fall of empires, beyond centuries of human progress and collapse. Time continues, history advances, but the prophetic sequence remains incomplete. And this is where the sense of suspension enters the story. Nearly 2,000 years have passed inside this pause. Empires have risen and vanished. Borders have shifted. Technologies have reshaped the human experience. And yet the final segment of Daniel's timeline remains unopened, waiting like an unfinished sentence that history refuses to complete. This is what unsettles scholars and believers alike. Because if the first 69 weeks were fulfilled with absolute precision, then the remaining 7 years are not symbolic. They are not optional. They are not canceled by delay, they are simply untriggered. A paused mechanism is not a broken one. And the text gives a clue about what restarts it. The final week begins with a covenant, a binding agreement, a moment that looks like resolution, stability, peace. The kind of event the world celebrates, not fears. The kind of moment people point to and say, finally, the chaos is ending. But Daniel places this agreement inside the final 7 years, not before them, not after them, which means the world does not fall into crisis immediately. It is drawn into calm first. This is where the gap becomes more than a theological concept. It becomes a mirror. We live in a world desperately searching for stability, craving global solutions, willing to trade certainty for security. We are not waiting for collapse. We are waiting for relief. And Daniel's timeline suggests that relief is exactly how the final sequence begins. The pause itself serves a purpose. It creates space. It allows history to align technologically, politically, and psychologically for what comes next. A world fragmented enough to need unity, yet connected enough to enforce it. This is why the prophetic gap feels heavier now than ever before. It is not empty time. It is preparatory time. The clock has not failed. It has been waiting. And when it starts again, it does not announce itself with fire. It begins with agreement, with promises, with the language of peace. Understanding where the timeline stopped is essential, because once you see how precisely it moved before, you can no longer dismiss the idea that it will move again. And when it does, the silence we live inside will break. Not gradually, but all at once. Power rarely announces itself honestly. It does not arrive wearing the face it will one day reveal. It comes quietly, wrapped in language people want to hear, offering solutions before it ever demands obedience. Daniel understood this long before history gave the pattern a name. After the timeline was revealed, the visions shifted. Numbers gave way to symbols. Precision gave way to atmosphere. Daniel saw the future not as dates on a page, but as forces colliding in a storm. He described the world's final phase as a sea in turmoil, restless, unstable, churning with pressure beneath the surface. From that chaos, power emerged, not in human form at first, but as beasts, each one representing kingdoms that would dominate the world stage. The early beasts were familiar. They aligned with empires Daniel had already seen or would soon recognize. But the final one was different. It did not resemble anything that came before it. This fourth power was not merely strong, it was terrifying. It crushed instead of conquered. It consumed rather than ruled. And within it, Daniel noticed something that unsettled him more than the beast itself. Horns, centers of authority, distributed power, a system rather than a single throne. And among them, something smaller began to rise. At first, it did not look dangerous. It did not dominate immediately. It maneuvered. It displaced others quietly. 3 fell as it gained influence, not through open war, but through calculated replacement. And then Daniel noticed its eyes. Not the eyes of an animal, the eyes of a man. Intelligence, intention, awareness. This ruler did not inherit power passively. He understood it, he shaped it, and most importantly, he spoke. Words became his weapon. Daniel describes a mouth that speaks boastfully, against God, against truth, against anything that limits authority. This is not a tyrant who relies on fear alone. This is a figure who convinces first, controls later. What makes this ruler uniquely dangerous is not how he begins, but how long he hides. He rises during instability, when nations are desperate for relief and people are exhausted by uncertainty. He offers solutions that feel reasonable, agreements that feel necessary, peace that feels overdue. And for a time, it works. This is where Daniel's vision intersects with the paused timeline. The final 7 years do not begin with war. They begin with covenant, a confirmation of peace involving many. Stability returns, tension relaxes, the world breathes again. This is the most deceptive moment of all, because halfway through that final period, something shifts. The agreement is broken. The tone changes. What was once cooperation becomes domination. What was once tolerance becomes demand. And the mask comes off. Daniel describes the moment plainly. Sacrifice ends. The sacred is violated. The place meant for worship is turned into a platform for self-exaltation. This is what Scripture calls the abomination of desolation. It is not simply political betrayal. It is spiritual inversion. The ruler no longer pretends to serve peace. He demands allegiance. He does not merely govern behavior. He seeks to redefine truth itself. Laws change, boundaries dissolve, faith becomes defiance, and persecution follows. Those who refuse to conform are not just marginalized, they are targeted. The pressure becomes global, economic, social, existential. Participation in the system becomes a condition for survival. This is why the deception is so effective. People are not forced into it at first. They are convinced. Security becomes more valuable than conviction. Comfort more valuable than conscience. And by the time resistance feels necessary, escape is no longer simple. Daniel later sees that this ruler does not succeed by strength alone, but by deceit. He causes deception to prosper. People feel safe even as the trap closes. Centuries later, another vision echoes the same figure, this time expanded, intensified, unmistakable. A world system empowered not merely by human ambition, but by something darker beneath it. But Daniel's focus remains steady. This ruler is temporary. His authority has limits. His time is measured. Even at the height of his power, when resistance seems impossible and control feels absolute, the vision reminds us that his rise does not end the story. It accelerates it, because the breaking of the covenant does not lead to endless dominance. It triggers collapse. The system built on deception cannot sustain itself once truth is openly rejected. The very pressure used to enforce unity becomes the force that shatters it. This is the pattern Daniel saw: peace, then betrayal; unity, then coercion; calm, then tribulation. And this tribulation is not localized. It is not symbolic. It is described as unlike anything the world has ever experienced, global in scope, total in effect. This is the moment the world realizes it misjudged the nature of the peace it embraced. And yet, even here, Daniel does not end with despair, because the rise of false authority is not the climax of the vision. It is the signal that something else is about to interrupt history entirely. A kingdom that does not negotiate, a power that does not deceive, a rule that does not end. The darker the night becomes, the closer the dawn draws near. And that is where Daniel's vision turns, away from the ruler who promised peace and delivered control, and toward a kingdom that arrives without deception at all. After showing Daniel the full reach of deception, the vision does something unexpected. It pulls away, not toward chaos, not toward despair, but toward perspective. Because Daniel is not only shown how human power rises, he is shown how it ends. Long before the visions of beasts and broken covenants, Daniel had already been given a dream that quietly contained the conclusion of everything. It came through the mind of a king who believed his empire would last forever. A ruler standing at the height of power, unable to imagine a world beyond his own authority. In the dream, history was reduced to a single image, a statue, towering, impressive, terrifying in its stillness. Its head was gold, its chest silver, its body bronze, its legs iron, each layer representing an empire more expansive than the one before it, yet somehow less glorious. Power increased. Permanence diminished. The statue looked invincible, until something struck it. Not an army, not another empire. A stone, small, uncut, not shaped by human hands. It did not negotiate with the statue. It did not challenge it piece by piece. It struck at the feet, the very foundation holding the illusion upright. And in that single moment, everything collapsed. Gold did not survive the fall. Neither did silver, bronze, or iron. Strength did not save them. Size did not matter. They were reduced to dust, carried away by the wind as though they had never ruled at all. This is one of the most overlooked details in Daniel's visions. Human kingdoms do not fade gradually. They fall suddenly. From the outside, they look stable right up until the moment they are not. The stone, however, does not disappear. It grows. What began as something seemingly insignificant expands until it becomes a mountain, filling the entire earth. Not replacing one empire with another, but ending the concept of empire itself. Daniel is told plainly what this means. In the days of those kings, God establishes a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will not be inherited by another people. It will not decay. It will not fracture. It will not collapse under rebellion or corruption. It stands forever. This is the turning point of the entire narrative. Every system built by human ambition shares the same destiny. Babylon fell, Persia fell, Greece fell, Rome fell. Even the most powerful modern nations are not exempt from the same law. History proves this relentlessly. No empire survives time. But this kingdom is not sustained by borders, armies, or economies. It does not depend on public approval or military dominance. It does not rise because the world invites it. It arrives because time allows nothing else to remain. This is why Daniel's vision does not fear the rise of false power. It places it in context. The final ruler may appear unstoppable. His system may feel total. His reach may seem global. But his authority exists inside a timeline that is already closing. The stone does not wait for permission. It does not need to defeat every empire individually. When it strikes, all human authority collapses at once, not because it is weak, but because it was never permanent to begin with. This is what reframes the entire story. The Great Tribulation is not the end. It is the final exposure of a system that cannot endure truth. The collapse that follows is not chaos without purpose. It is transition, from temporary rule to eternal reign. Daniel's vision insists on this order. Darkness rises first, deception peaks, control tightens, and then without warning, authority shifts away from human hands entirely. There is no campaign, no election, no negotiation, only replacement. This is why the kingdom of God is described differently than anything before it. It does not rise from the sea of nations. It does not emerge from conflict. It is not born through violence. It descends. And unlike every empire before it, this kingdom does not need to defend itself against time. Time itself bows to it. This is the point where fear loses its grip, because if the end of human rule is inevitable, then the rise of false peace is only temporary. If the stone is coming, then the statue is already standing on borrowed ground. Daniel's visions do not ask us to fix the world. They ask us to see it clearly. Human power reaches its height just before it collapses. Deception thrives just before it is exposed. And history moves forward not toward endless control, but toward resolution. The kingdom that ends all kingdoms does not arrive to compete. It arrives to remain. And when it does, the question is no longer which empire will survive. The question becomes far more personal. Because when every system falls, only one thing remains to be decided: where each life stands when the dust settles. When Daniel's visions reach their end, they no longer speak about empires. They speak about people. After centuries of symbols, timelines, and kingdoms rising and collapsing, the focus narrows until it becomes impossible to look away. The final scene is not political. It is personal. Daniel is shown a time of distress unlike anything before it. Not because suffering is new, but because this moment gathers all of history into a single reckoning. Every era, every generation, every life lived quietly or loudly, remembered or forgotten. And then something happens that no system of power can prevent. Humanity wakes up. Those who sleep in the dust rise, not as a metaphor, not as a symbol of legacy or memory, but as living beings brought face to face with eternity. Kings rise beside servants. The celebrated rise beside the invisible. No rank remains. No advantage survives. Two outcomes stand side by side: life everlasting and everlasting loss. There is no middle ground described here, no neutral space to stand and observe. The final vision removes distance. It does not allow spectators. This is why Daniel's prophecy slows down at the end, because urgency is not meant to overwhelm, it is meant to clarify. The visions were never given to satisfy curiosity about the future. They were given to expose what truly matters when the future arrives. When time itself reaches its limit, knowledge alone is not enough. Awareness alone does not decide anything. Choice does. And that choice does not wait for the resurrection. It is made long before it. The message softens here, almost gently. Not because the truth has changed, but because the door is still open. The weight of prophecy is not meant to crush. It is meant to invite. Judgment is real, but it is not the desire. Restoration is the offer. Mercy stands before the moment when history can no longer be delayed. This is where the story fades from warning into quiet resolve. You are not asked to predict dates. You are not asked to fear events. You are asked to decide where you stand. Because when the silence breaks and the pause in history finally ends, the question will not be whether Daniel was right. The question will be whether you were ready. And for now, while the gap still holds, while the final week has not yet begun, there is still time to choose calmly, clearly, and without pressure. The future does not rush, but it does arrive.